Look, let's not beat around the bush here. The Venom films are not good films by any means. The first one is this bland film with so many forgettable characters that is carried by Tom Hardy's performance. And the second one is this borderline awful film with forgettable characters that is carried by Tom Hardy's performance. And yet, despite how mediocre at best both films are, I can't help but say that I really enjoyed watching both of them. I recently watched Venom Let There Be Carnage, and I have never enjoyed watching a more terrible film. The direction, the cinematography, the script, it's just not good at all. Even the acting wasn't great in the film. There were exceptions, of course. Stephen Graham refuses to give a bad performance, even when the material is so far beneath him. Anne is such a bland, boring, wet fart of a character, yet Michelle Williams is such a great actress that she's able to put just enough life into the character to justify her existence. In fact, I completely forgot that Anne and Eddie weren't together and that Anne had a new boyfriend/fiancé called Dan. Every now and then the film tries to push this will they won't they between the two characters, which falls completely flat. Firstly, because no one cares enough about Anne to want to see her and Eddie actually get together. Secondly, it distracts from the one thing that makes this film worth watching in the background whilst you do something else in the first place, which is the relationship between Eddie and Venom. And the third reason is that Anne's fiancé Dan is actually an okay dude. He's about as interesting as Anne, so they make a good fit. Now, I'm going to say something a little controversial here, but I'm not sure if I like Tom Hardy's performance in Let There Be Carnage, at least as Eddie Brock. His performance as Venom is great and he has fantastic chemistry with himself, but sometimes his performance as Eddie Brock was just a little too much for me.
I think I'm Pablo Picasso. No! Okay? Well, say what you see. Oh, I know this one. It's a tree.
I feel like the director probably should have told him to rein it in a bit, but other than the occasional moments of what I would call overacting, he's still the best part of this film. It was also sort of weird seeing so many British actors in these films too. Tom Hardy is obviously British and so is Riz Ahmed from the first film, but Venom Let There Be Carnage couldn't hold back the British at all. Naomi Harris joined the cast. One of England's best actors, Stephen Graham, was here. The priest at the end of the film was played by another of England's best actors, Reece Shearsmith. Jack Naylor from Holby City showed up for a little cameo. The old woman who tormented Shriek was British too. And the director of this film was Andy Serkis. It doesn't get more British than that. Most audiences would not recognise these actors, but as an English guy, it was kind of fun when every now and then someone would show up on screen and I'd go, I know them. The Venom films are also legitimately funny in my opinion. The MCU and superhero films in general often get a lot of flack for their humour just not being very good. However, humour is one thing that I think Venom actually does quite well. It's the reason why so many people, including myself, actually enjoy these films, despite how objectively not great they are. They're not the funniest films in the world, but they do make me laugh. Whilst both films arguably have a good protagonist, or at least a protagonist that people don't mind watching, they undoubtedly really fumble their villains. Riz Ahmed is a pretty good actor, and yet he was wasted on such a flaccid noodle of a villain. I'm not the biggest comic nerd by any means, but I do think I know more comic characters than the average filmgoer. And even I had never heard of Riot before. When it comes to symbiotes in Marvel Comics, I think Venom, I think Carnage, I think Anti-Venom, I think Scream. I don't think Riot at all. Yeah, I know he's in the comics, but he's one of those characters that you never actually expect to make it to the big screen. Perhaps Riot is as equally dull in the comics, but he was a terrible villain. However, considering most people didn't know who Riot was before the Venom film, him being so one-note is fairly easy to overlook. What's even harder to overlook is the disrespect given to Carnage and Cletus Cassidy. Now, I am not fully invested in the Carnage lore and comics, but I know enough about the character and Cletus. Carnage is supposed to be this genuinely terrifying character that even Venom fears, and Cletus equally is horrifying for being the person that Carnage is able to form a symbiotic relationship with. Neither character is scary in this film. From day one, people have complained about Venom not being R-rated, and that decision hinders no character more than Carnage. Carnage without blood, guts and butts isn't really Carnage. This film provides a very neutered version of both Carnage and Cletus, and it was very hard to accept as just having Carnage go full psycho on everyone in horrific detail really would have enhanced this film. The only time where Cletus felt scary or unhinged is the scene where Eddie reads his letter and the screen turned into an animation. It really suited the character and was a highlight of the film. Also, Shriek was terrible in this film. I actually hadn't heard of the character before and got her confused with Scream from the comics. I said Tom Hardy overacted a little here and there in Let There Be Carnage, but Naomi Harris really overdid it.
Rockalicious! We're gonna live. Whose finger were you meant for?
I just found her so annoying in this film. She was just way too much. Riz Ahmed, Woody Harrelson and Naomi Harris are all good actors, but none of them gave really good performances in these films. Woody Harrelson came the closest though. Also, I'm just remembering something else from Let There Be Carnage that bothered me. How does Shriek even have powers? Did I miss something from the first film? I assume that Eddie's world was one without powers, or at least one where characters don't have powers naturally, and yet everyone just accepts that Shriek has superpowers. I know that people are aware of Venom walking around, but no one even asked how she ended up with those abilities, nor is there even any semblance of explanation in this film. The editing in this film sucked too. It would just cut so much. Shots weren't allowed to linger, and other shots just didn't look good at all. The film honestly looks really cheap at times. The CGI in these films is fine. It's not seamless at all though. It'll always look like a CGI creation standing next to actual human actors, but when there's no humans around, the CGI actually looks alright. Maybe it just needed more time in the oven, or maybe the poor direction and cinematography had a strong detrimental effect on the CGI. I clearly have more negatives than positives when it comes to talking about these films. If someone came over to me and spoke about how awful the Venom films were, then I would not argue against them. However, I am looking forward to the confirmed Venom 3. Tom Hardy and Mrs. Chen are just so enjoyable to watch, and Venom is so funny that I don't mind seeing more of this interpretation of the character. Sony have no idea what they're doing when it comes to Spider-Man films that don't have Spider-Man in, and arguably the ones with Spider-Man in aren't always great either. They keep taking these Spider-Man villains and then trying and twisting them into anti-heroes, and it just doesn't work. But Venom, who has at times been an anti-hero before, seems to, at least for me, slipped into the territory of being so bad that it's good. Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage are the definition of guilty pleasure movies. They get so much wrong, and yet I just can't take my eyes off it. If you didn't like the first Venom film, don't watch the second one. It's even worse. And if you did like the first Venom film, then go watch the second one, because it's even worse. Anyway, that's it. See ya.